She walked in wearing pastel pink and red heels, young, underestimated, and barely past 27. Her opponent? A seasoned congresswoman with a fire in her eyes and a point to prove. No one expected what happened next, but when the cameras rolled, the entire room would never forget her name. 2 women, 1 stage, a live audience ready to explode, and no way to rewind. The Capitol Clash studio pulsed with electricity. Under the searing blaze of overhead lights, every seat was filled, every face on edge. On one side, rows of red-capped MAGA supporters clutched banners, eyes ablaze with pride. On the other, progressive activists glared silently, their arms crossed, their phones ready. The room was divided, in ideology, in allegiance, and in anticipation. The set gleamed like a stage built for war. Hardwood floors polished to a mirror shine reflected the towering LED panels behind the podiums. Studio staff whispered backstage. Producers counted down. Cameras adjusted for the perfect angle. And somewhere behind a curtain, Caroline Leavitt took a deep breath. She stepped out, and the crowd reacted instantly. A wave of murmurs, a few cheers, scattered claps from the MAGA side. Dressed in a pastel blazer, her cross necklace glinting under the lights, Caroline walked to her podium without hesitation. Every step a statement, every inch of her a contradiction to the caricature they'd drawn of her online. She was young, she was polished, and she was ready. Moments later, her opponent arrived. Congresswoman Ayanna Pierce emerged with the presence of a general. Her tailored navy suit, hair in a flawless twist bun, and sharp heels sent a message. This wasn't her first battle, and she didn't plan to lose. Ayanna Pierce, a progressive lioness with a track record of fiery speeches and viral moments, scanned the audience like a queen surveying her kingdom. Her smile was polite. Her eyes were daggers. Then came Rachel Harper. The show's host, known for her commanding presence, took center stage with a clipboard and a tone that silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice ringing out, "welcome to Capitol Clash, the arena where America's ideas collide. Tonight, we witness 2 titans of different generations face off in a battle that goes beyond politics. This is a debate about the future." The room tensed, cameras panned, hearts raced, and somewhere far beyond that studio, a digital storm was already forming. Oh, 1 question. That's all it took to set the room on fire. Rachel Harper barely had time to lift her first question when it happened. Ayanna Pierce turned to Caroline with a smile too polite to be genuine, the kind of smile that softened the blade just before the strike. "Miss Leavitt," she began, her voice honeyed with just a touch of sarcasm, "it's refreshing to see such a young face representing the White House. But tell me, how does someone just 27, and a new mother, no less, justify defending Trump's economic policies like tariffs when they've hurt American families by driving up prices?" The room rippled with murmurs. On the progressive side, smirks broke out. Phones tilted to record. The jab was clear. Her age, her experience, her motherhood, all weaponized in a single question, but Caroline didn't blink. Her lips curled into a razor-sharp smile as she calmly faced the Congresswoman. "Thank you for the warm welcome, Congresswoman," she said, voice steady as steel. "But neither my youth nor my motherhood disqualifies me from standing up for Americans. In fact, it sharpens my focus. I've met the farmers in Iowa. I've sat with steelworkers in Pennsylvania. And do you know what they tell me?" She paused. "They thank President Trump for putting America first, for standing up to unfair trade deals that sold their livelihoods overseas. Have you met them? Or are you too busy tweeting about pain from the comfort of Congress?" A boom. The audience erupted. Cheers thundered from the MAGA corner, and even some on the progressive side gasped. Phones shot into the air. The host raised a hand to calm the crowd, but the energy refused to die down. Pierce's smile faltered just for a moment. The first strike had landed, and it hadn't come from her. She came prepared. The crowd could feel it. And her opponent didn't see it coming. Congresswoman Ayanna Pierce leaned into the podium, undeterred but clearly aware now that this wasn't going to be a victory by default. "Miss Leavitt," she said sharply, "you talk about protecting American workers, but tariffs don't just target foreign companies. They backfire. They've cost farmers their markets and raised production costs across the board. You're a communications specialist, sure. But do you even understand the numbers you're defending? Or are you just repeating what the former president tells you?" A wave of murmurs rolled through the room again. But this time, they weren't all in Pierce's favor. There was a tightness to her tone, a whiff of condescension. The audience could feel it. Caroline took a small step forward, calm, collected. "Congresswoman," she said, "I don't just read data. I listen to the people behind those numbers. Farmers, welders, truckers. They don't analyze spreadsheets for a living. They just want jobs, stability, and a leader who fights for them. You want data?" Her voice sharpened. Manufacturing jobs rose by over 450,000 under President Trump before the pandemic. That's not spin. That's the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the trade deals you supported? They gutted Middle America. You talk like an economist, but you legislate like a lobbyist. Again, the crowd couldn't hold back. The MAGA side stood, shouting support. Even Harper, ever the professional, raised an eyebrow in surprise. This wasn't a scripted press briefing. Caroline was swinging and landing. Ayanna's jaw clenched, her eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to being outmatched on camera. This wasn't going to plan. Facts can be weapons, and tonight, one side came locked and loaded. Desperate to regain momentum, Pierce lifted a printed report. "Let me educate you, Miss Leavitt," she said, holding it up for the cameras. "The Department of Agriculture reported over 200,000 agricultural jobs were impacted negatively by tariffs. Those are facts, not tweets. Maybe before defending failed policies, you should spend more time understanding their consequences." She delivered the line with polish, the type that usually drew applause. But this time there was hesitation in the room. Then Caroline struck. "Let's talk facts, Congresswoman," she said smoothly, "but let's talk about all of them." She leaned forward slightly. "While you quote cherry-picked statistics, let me remind you, under Trump, wages for blue-collar workers rose faster than at any point during the Obama administration. Unemployment among African Americans reached a record low. Food prices may have gone up, but median household income rose 6% in the same time frame." She tilted her head, voice unwavering. "You call that a failure. The families I met call it survival." The silence that followed was deafening. Not a silence of boredom, but of stunned absorption. The progressive activists weren't clapping anymore. The MAGA section buzzed like a hive on fire. Harper adjusted her earpiece, eyes darting toward the control room. The producer was signaling something, maybe to slow down, maybe to ride the wave. But Caroline Leavitt wasn't slowing down. Ayanna Pierce, usually the one dictating the tone, now found herself following. And for the first time she glanced sideways, not at Caroline, but at the cameras, searching, grasping. The data duel wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about who owned the story, and tonight it wasn't her. She tried to bring morality into the ring, but Caroline brought steel. The room hadn't cooled. If anything, the heat had just begun to simmer under the surface. Congresswoman Ayanna Pierce, fighting to regain ground, reached for her strongest card, moral outrage. "Miss Leavitt," she said, her voice louder now, more impassioned, You speak about jobs and statistics, but let's not forget who you're defending. A man who has disrespected women, mocked immigrants, and slashed protections for minorities. I don't just fight for numbers. I fight for people, real people, the poor, the marginalized, the forgotten. Applause broke from the progressive side of the audience, loud and earnest. She let it swell. I've marched for justice, she continued, her voice rising like a crescendo. I've sponsored bills to raise the minimum wage, to protect unions, to give voice to the voiceless. You polish an administration's image on social media. That's not leadership, that's theater. For a moment, it landed. But Caroline didn't blink. She didn't even shift. Theater? She said softly, then louder, with precision. Congresswoman, the only performance I see is yours. Her gaze was steady as a sniper's aim. I don't tweet from the sidelines. I don't write speeches about justice while living behind gated walls. I show up. In steel towns, in farming communities, in broken neighborhoods the elite left behind. You say "I Polish," but I amplify their stories. You march for justice. I speak for the ones no one else listens to. The MAGA crowd erupted like a volcano. Cheers, claps. Someone even shouted, "That's our girl." Ayanna's shoulders tensed. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Caroline hadn't just responded. She'd flipped the moral high ground upside down and claimed it for herself. When ideals collide with reality, only one can stand. Rachel Harper leaned into her mic, trying to regain control. Her voice was calm, but the tension in the room was spiraling. Congresswoman Pierce, she said, as a woman who champions peace, how do you reconcile that with the rising aggression across the globe, and what would your strategy be to protect Americans? Ayanna nodded, taking the bait. This was her turf, or so she thought. Rachel, she said, eyes bright, voice steady. As a woman and as a mother, I know that strength comes from compassion. Trump's administration raised military spending by 7% last year. That doesn't bring peace. It pushes us closer to conflict. I support diplomacy. I support cooperation. I believe peace is possible without posturing and power games. The progressive audience clapped again. They wanted that message. They needed it. But Caroline? She didn't flinch. Congresswoman, she said, turning slowly, peace without strength is a slogan, not a policy. Her voice was colder now, sharper. Trump's security policies helped eliminate 90% of ISIS senior leadership. He demanded NATO members pay their fair share. He stood up to China's aggression. You call it posturing. I call it protecting the innocent. The crowd stirred again. MAGA supporters stood up mid-response. Applause thundered. I'm a woman too, she continued, voice rising. And I know what safety means for families, Denis, mine included. You want to talk about peace? Then look into the eyes of mothers who lost their sons to fentanyl, smuggled across a porous border. Look into the eyes of children who grew up fatherless because we let threats grow unchecked. Peace comes only from strength. The line hit like a hammer. Peace comes only from strength. Phones were already tweeting it. Someone mouthed it silently. A few mouths whispered, "That's going viral." Ayanna was reeling again. She looked to Harper, but Harper said nothing because she knew what everyone else in that room knew too. Caroline had just landed the biggest blow of the night. The pressure was unbearable. And for one of them, it showed. Congresswoman Pierce tried to reset. She adjusted her papers, cleared her throat, and delivered her next line with deliberate strength. Miss Leavitt, she began, you call it strength. I call it reckless. While this administration poured billions into the Pentagon, over 30 million Americans remained without health insurance. We're spending on bombs, not babies. I fight for women, workers, the uninsured. You defend a man who failed them all." It was a strong attack, but something in her voice had changed. A tremble, a hesitation. Caroline didn't let it pass. She stepped closer to the mic. "You say I defend him," she said. "I defend what he did. Under President Trump, prescription drug prices dropped 20%. Ask the Department of Health. Detroit's unemployment dropped from 7% to 4%. That's not a slogan. That's real life." Ayanna opened her mouth, but Caroline cut in. "You talk about fighting, but I see the people you claim to fight for. I've looked them in the eyes. I've stood where they live. And I don't need a congressional seat to care. I need a platform, and I'm using it for them." The crowd was on its feet. Even Harper couldn't hide her astonishment. She leaned back, lips slightly parted. Ayanna Pierce stood silent, blinking, jaw tense. For the first time that night, she looked shaken. A lioness caught off guard, a voice that once roared, now grasping for strength. Caroline wasn't just winning, she was breaking her. What happened in the studio was just the beginning. The internet had other plans. Even as the debate raged on, another war had begun. Not in the studio, but in the digital trenches. The moment Caroline uttered peace comes only from strength. A TikTok user clipped it. Within 5 minutes, the video hit 10,000 likes. 10 minutes later, 500,000. On X, the hashtag #LeavittStorm surged into global trending. MAGA influencers reposted her every line. Screenshots, memes, side-by-sides comparing her composure to Pierce's flustered reactions. "Caroline Leavitt is Gen Z's Iron Lady," one viral post read. 27 and just wiped the floor with a sitting congresswoman, said another. Meanwhile, Ayanna's team scrambled. They posted clips of her lines about health care, about justice, about peace. But they barely scratched the surface. Engagement was flat. The narrative had slipped through their fingers. Fox News ran a banner, breaking: Caroline Leavitt crushes Capitol debate. Even CNN's panel couldn't deny it. One analyst muttered, "I don't like her politics, but that was a masterclass in composure." Meanwhile, back in the studio, Caroline's phone buzzed backstage with messages from high-level campaign staff, media requests, and even an invite to appear on Tucker Carlson tonight. "Ayanna?" She posted a photo with the caption, "Still fighting for justice, always will." It barely passed 9,000 likes before being buried under a flood of retweets declaring, "Caroline just ended her career." The storm was no longer just on stage. It had engulfed the entire internet, and Caroline Leavitt stood calmly at its center, smiling. One moment can end a political career or ignite a new movement. The debate had ended, but the aftermath? It was just beginning. Within hours, Caroline Leavitt's performance had dominated not only TikTok and X, but mainstream newsrooms from coast to coast. Fox News opened with a fiery headline: Trump's press secretary delivers knockout blow. Leavitt leaves no doubt. Breitbart ran an article titled "Trump's Secret Weapon Revealed. Meet Caroline Leavitt." Even CNN, reluctant but unable to ignore the buzz, aired a panel segment asking, "Has a new conservative star been born?" Meanwhile, back in Washington, Ayanna Pierce sat with her campaign team, replaying clips on a muted phone screen. Each time her voice trembled. Each time Caroline's counter sliced clean. Her advisors looked tense. Her chief strategist spoke bluntly, "You were outflanked. We need to recalibrate. Fast!" Progressive communities tried to rally behind her, sharing her quotes about health care, about peace, about justice. But the numbers didn't lie. Clips of Leavitt's responses had racked up over 6 million views across social platforms in less than 24 hours. An impromptu poll posted on X by Rasmussen Reports showed 72% of respondents believed Caroline Leavitt won the debate. while only 19% supported Pierce. Political analysts debated whether this was just a flash in the pan or the start of something far bigger. And while some whispered caution, others declared it loudly. This wasn't just a win, it was a political shift. One night changed everything, and the world noticed. The White House office lights glowed gently into the night. Caroline stood alone, hands clasped, eyes watching a muted news segment replaying her quote, the one that lit up the nation. Peace comes only from strength. Outside her window, protesters and supporters gathered near Lafayette Square. Some waved MAGA flags. Others held up signs with her face photoshopped onto Lady Liberty. Her inbox overflowed with media invitations. Tucker Carlson tonight. The Megyn Kelly Show, meet the press. She had been the press secretary. Now she was something more. A Gallup poll released that morning showed 62% of Americans under 35 knew her name, and 45% viewed her as a rising political leader. Across the country, conservative women's groups were printing T-shirts, coffee mugs, and banners bearing her face and tagline, "Peace through Strength, Caroline Leavitt." Meanwhile, Ayanna Pierce, once thought untouchable, was quietly pulled from an upcoming speaking engagement. Her staff insisted she needed time to regroup, but insiders knew the truth. The clash had left more than bruises. It had shaken the very ground she stood on. Progressive forums tried to spin the narrative. Courage isn't always loud, but the crowd had already chosen their gladiator. Caroline had entered as a spokesperson. She walked out as a symbol. The message was clear, and so was the moment. A new era had begun. She didn't just win a debate, she changed the game. From Capitol clash to viral storm, from underestimated underdog to rising national icon. Caroline Leavitt's battle wasn't just about facts or policies. It was about presence, precision, power under pressure. Ayanna Pierce brought fire, but Caroline brought steel. And in today's political arena, only one could stand unshaken. So the question isn't whether she won. The question is, what comes next? Will she rise further? Will she lead the new wave of Gen Z conservatism? Or will her opponents come back stronger than ever? You decide. But whatever you do, don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe now for more epic political showdowns, viral debate moments, and stories that shake the system. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next round.